Well, good morning again, and thank you for joining us for the morning satsang. Um, just a word that Dharmini is doing much better, but she still needs a little more rest just to get her regular strength back. But she appreciates all your messages and prayers, and they definitely are helping. So, as you may remember, we are celebrating for the next few weeks Swami Kriyananda's life. His Moksha Day was the 21st of April, Tuesday, and then his birthday is coming up, May 19th, in a few weeks. And so we thought to take these next few weeks to celebrate, to just spend time with Swamiji in different aspects of his life, his work. It's really, of course, impossible to present his whole life unless we had the full 87 years of his life to do it in. And even then, we would not be able to grasp it, because it's not just a question of quantity, but also quality. There was so much depth in Swamiji, so much that I don't even want to say I'm only beginning to understand, because I don't want to claim that I have that understanding, but that I'm understanding in a deeper way than I did before. He would often say that he would spend years meditating on a glance that Master gave him, or a certain change in the tone of his voice, and he would, meditate and say, now what did he mean by that, or pull more understanding from that episode. And sometimes that would come in a flash, as Deviji was saying, I believe that once they were sitting with Swamiji, and then he said, that's what he meant. It occurred to him that what Master meant by in a certain interaction, which he then went on to explain to Jyotishji and Deviji. I couldn't really understand how Swamiji could do that. I mean, I believed him, I believed that he could, but I couldn't relate to it in the sense of, how could you meditate for years on a glance until Swamiji left the body? And when he left the body, then I found, my gosh, I was reflecting on interactions that we had had, or times when I had seen him in a big gathering, certain things he had done, and I began to meditate on those. I would say, reflect on them, think them over, recall them. Partly it was a way of spending time with him, but also to see a video of him, that maybe a talk that I had seen before, and then realizing, there was more to it than I had understood at first. Again, I always knew there was more to it, because as Master said, when you comprehend a master, then you will be one. And so it isn't as if we ever try to feel that, yes, I fully understood, until we're one with God, even as Master is, even as Swamiji is. As Master told him, you will find God at the end of this life. So, at the same time, I'm not going to give a whole satsang just about one particular glance. It might be fun to try to do so, but I'd have to come more prepared than I have come. So we have done this at different times over the years. Here at Ananda Chennai, we've gone through Swamiji's life over the course of weeks in this same way. And so I thought to try to do something a little bit different this time. And the other advantage we have in terms of understanding Swamiji's life, most of us, is that you've seen the movie The Answer. And so we, at least Dharmini and I, didn't grow up at Ananda with The Answer movie. Many of you did not grow up with The Answer movie in the sense that you remember when it came out. In fact, when it was out in the theater just a few years ago, we went to so many of the showings, and then the final showing was on September 12th, the day that Swamiji met Master, the anniversary of that. So very thrilling that experience. Funny to reflect on now with the whole coronavirus thing going on, that, oh yes, let's all run to the movie theater and we hope it's filled with people. Anyway, it was filled then. There were many nights that it was at capacity. It was really quite inspiring to see that. But even as we did not grow up with the answer, but we grew up, you could say, reading The New Path. There are many people at Ananda who came in the early years before the path was written. So even they could say, I remember when the New Path used to be called The Path, the first edition. And so they remember when that came out, or they were working to help get that book out. So in this way it goes on. We will see that parts of our spiritual life that are so fundamental now had their origin, and in this case had their origin in Swamiji's creativity and his vision, and above all in his attunement and his devotion to Master. As he said, if I'm remembered at all, I want to be remembered as a good disciple, nothing more. And Sri Karthikeyan praised Swamiji often for saying that I've never met one so devoted to his Master, who never puts himself ahead of his Master, and so on. So it was very nice to see that in Swamiji, and that's, of course, on one level what Swamiji meant to us. Not just myself, but all of us, is that he made Master real for us. And I spoke about that last week. So I thought to just go through a certain chapter of Swamiji's life, actually as it relates to the Answer movie. You may recall in the Answer, or if you've not seen it, The New Path, actually a lot is drawn from The New Path, the book in the movie. Swamiji wrote the script for the movie, and then the director worked with that script and then also brought in some stories from The New Path that Swamiji hadn't included in the movie, but they are in the movie now. And you may remember at the end, Swamiji is with Master, and so we'll... well, I shouldn't say at the end, but anyway, Swamiji is with Master, and so I'm going to go through some of that period and then afterward as well. So, as you know, Swamiji came to Master on September 12th, as I just said, in 1948, and this is one of the earliest photos of him outside Mount Washington, which is the headquarters of Master's work in Los Angeles. We know it's one of the earliest photos because Swamiji doesn't yet have a beard. Because early on, as soon as Master had Swamiji speaking in public, he asked him to grow a beard because he would help him perhaps to look older, because Swamiji was 22 and he was lecturing to people in the audiences. In those days, in the late 1940s, the only people who were interested in spirituality of this kind were easily in their 40s or 50s or older. And so here was this young man. Swamiji had also only been with Master 9 months when he had him out speaking in public. And so, as Master said, the beard will give you character, and Master said Swamiji said it will make me a character. Because in those days, nobody had a beard, ever. And so sometimes that's true in certain cultures here too, in modern day, but nobody had a beard. And so, in fact, sometimes Swamiji walking down the street, somebody would call out and heckle him and say, "Fidel Castro!" That was the only other person anybody knew of who wore a beard. This is a photo of Swamiji with his parents, his mother and father, and so partly I wanted to show this to you because it's important to remember when watching The Answer that the actors who play the people in the movie are not the actual people. Sometimes people will comment on, oh, it's so wonderful to see Master, and it is wonderful to see the actor who played Master, definitely. But still, it's important to remember that these are the real people. And so this might have been their first visit. I don't know how many times they visited Swamiji there during Master's lifetime. At least once, but maybe not more. I'm not sure. In any case, this was one of their visits. This is a photo of Swamiji in a gathering of disciples with Master here, and Swamiji's here. And I'd like to go into the story behind all of these photos, partly because I'd like to know all the stories, which I don't, but also just for the sake of time, what I'm wanting to do is give you just a general impression. This here on the end, hard to see, is Dr. Lewis, Master's first disciple in America. Here's another photo of Swamiji with Master, Swamiji here and Master here. And many of the monks are gathered too. In this particular photograph, as the photographer was getting ready, Master said, "Just a moment, let me go into Samadhi first." All right. Just that fast. Just amazing that he could do it that way. And it's beautiful to see also Swamiji's devotion. It's so obvious in his looking at Master that way. This is a photo of the monks meditating. I think it might be at Mount Washington. I'm not sure. This is Swamiji here. And Master placed him in charge of the monks very early on, and he was younger and had come, much more recently than the other monks at that time. And so, but his goal, because it was Master's request, was to get the monks and their life more organized and more structured and supported, so that, because he saw so many young monks come and then leave, because it was basically a sink or swim proposition. If you could find a way to tune in, you could come right in and stay in. But there wasn't, even at the early years of Ananda, people would comment, there weren't classes, there weren't, all these kinds of structured activities that we have now to be supportive. But of course there was Swamiji's presence, just as in these years with Master, there was Master's presence. Still, Swamiji was happy to note that as the monks did get more organized, and that the structure helped the more and more monks come and then stay. This is at the Lake Shrine dedication in 1950, which was Master's last major property acquired in his lifetime. Just for reference, Master left the body in 1952. And so when this was dedicated, this property, it was a big event. Many of you may have seen the photos of that or video clips of that. This is Swamiji leading the monks in yoga postures. A Master often had Swamiji demonstrate the yoga postures. Swamiji wasn't particularly good at them at first, and then when Master had him demonstrate, show these asanas, Swamiji got up a little bit hesitantly and suddenly found that in Master's presence he could do them all effortlessly. Whether Master gave him that power or reawakened in him samskars of doing Hatha Yoga before, I don't know. But Swamiji from then on became the demonstrator of the asanas, not only with Master, but also his photographs of him were featured in the magazine showing the postures and so on. You can still see those photographs in the Art and Science of Raja Yoga book. It's not easy to see here, but this is Master sitting in front of a podium. This is the top of Master's head right there. Easier to see. In this next photo, there's the same podium from a different angle. And so again, this was the dedication of the lake shrine. This is Swamiji here, one of all of or the Master's ministers who he had lecturing at the different ones of his churches and in public were gathered here with him, and some of the other monks as well. The lake is behind, this scene, Master standing at the edge of the lake. This is a fun photo of Swamiji here demonstrating the energization exercises. This is outside of Hollywood Church, and this is Reverend Bernard who is teaching the classes. Swamiji was demonstrating to the crowd something again back in the 1950s, but we can all relate to it. We just did this one earlier this morning. And so it's also lovely, Swamiji standing in the back of a pickup truck so as to better be able to be seen. And so, again, as I said, this was at the Hollywood Church where Swamiji met Master, that same church, back on September 12th, also where Swamiji became the main minister in the years later. This is another photo of Swamiji, and what I find so striking about it is that, because it's one of the few sort of portrait shots of Swamiji. And when I was looking at it, I was just marveling at how his eyes, to me, look just the same as they always did throughout the years. He himself commented that when he saw a picture of his childhood, he saw a picture of himself at the age of 5, he said, "I can see that the eyes are unchanged. It's the same old fellow." And so, of course, he commented on how much he grew in Master's presence, how much he learned over the years, how much he came to understand, how he says that, "Oh, Master, if only I knew then," he writes in the New Path, "what I know now, I could have been a much better disciple when I was with you." And he said, "But I also reflect that maybe in 15 more years," because it might have been 15 years since Master's passing, or maybe more than that when he was writing the book, maybe 20 years. He said, I'm reflecting that I would be saying the same thing. I guess it was 25 years. So 25 years from now, I would look back and say, well, I wish I knew then. It's a constant presence of unfolding and growing. We do deepen, obviously. And on another level, so much of who we are, we do bring into this lifetime. It's just that perhaps more veils are removed from our true nature. I'm not sure. Maybe it's a combination of both. In any case, it was really striking to me, the similarity of Swamiji's eyes back then, too. This is now coming to the end of Master's life. This was Christmas of 1951, and Swamiji's here with Master, Dr. Lewis is here, and Master's most advanced disciple, Rajarshi Janakananda, is here. Dr. Lewis's wife, Mrs. Lewis, is going to sit next to him. And Swamiji also had a close relationship with Rajarshi as well, who became the president. Rajarshi became the president after Master's passing. January 5th, Master's birthday at the Hollywood Church. Swamiji helped to break ground for this. This is a little model of the bookshop and meditation chapel that they were building. They were, starting the construction of as a gift to Master on his birthday. And so you can see. Can you see? I can see it there. It's hard to see on the TV, but there's an outline of the sort of where the footprint of the new building. And Swamiji dedicating the site. This is a Master's birthday that evening, a gathering of all the disciples. And this is Swamiji behind Master, his back to the camera, but along with the other monks helping to serve everybody at the dinner. And then right before Master's passing, the new ambassador to India, the first ambassador of India to America, because this again was 1952, after Republic Day, after the formation of India, and then the first ambassador to America from India came and visited Master, and this is the ambassador here, his wife is here, the consul general was there. This is a famous actor and singer named Dick Hames, and this is Swamiji here. Again, it's a terrible photo, but that's what we have. This, of course, is a photo familiar to all of you. It's the one, right here on the wall, of Swamiji giving a gift to Master of Bengali Singhariyas, as they're called, but samosas, thank you. And so this is the ambassador's wife. And then this is at the Biltmore, March 7th, 1952, when Master left the body. Swamiji was there. He was seated at the table with Dick Hames, this actor. Dick Hames had come to Master with a lot of devotion, and Swamiji taught him the different techniques and also initiated him into Kriya. And this is interesting as well, just because Master had asked Swamiji, which we often think of, we know the story of how Swamiji asked Master to give a lecture in Master's place, because Master couldn't go to San Diego that Sunday. And he said, "You should go." Swamiji received that message through Bernard. And Swamiji had never lectured before, and suddenly he was lecturing and in Master's place, and then on top of that, Master asked him to give a Kriya initiation afterwards. And so he had just again been with Master 9 months. And as he said, I'd only attended one Kriya initiation before, my own. And so the thing is that, it's interesting that Master had Swamiji perform Kriya initiations when Master was still in the body. In other words, Swamiji was obviously doing it on Master's behalf. It wasn't that the people he initiated became his disciples. They were Master's disciples. But Master asked Swamiji to pass on that diksha, or that initiation. And that also, for example, that's one confirmation that touch of blessing can be passed on. Because sometimes people will make a big thing of saying you have to meet the Guru in the physical body, and otherwise it doesn't count. And even Master said that there must be one physical contact between the Guru and disciple. And so that seems to endorse that statement. But again, in Master's own lifetime, he had Swamiji and others initiate on his behalf when he could have. When he was in the body, Master he could have initiated the person, but he was showing that physical touch could be passed on from, one, in other words, someone received the touch from someone who had received it from Master, and so on. And so that's really an important aspect of the line of discipleship, and that there be a direct line from the Guru to each of us that connects us to the Guru. Remember, Master is the Guru. It's his power that may reach us directly, may reach us through others as well. But still, it's his power. Of course, it's God's power, but God in that form. Then that night, as you all know, Master left the body. March 7th was his Mahasamadhi, which we commemorated. I can't say we celebrated, but we definitely took a time to remember and celebrate Master's life just a few weeks ago. In fact, we had a Kriya initiation on that day, and that was something we hadn't done before, and it was a good thing too, because That was our last chance. We were so thrilled that we had 70 people in this temple, and now just the thought of it gives you a heart attack. But this is Swamiji, the top of Swamiji's head here. It's not easy to make out that it's him, but it is. And so it, of course, as he said, was devastating to lose Master's physical presence. He felt Master's connection continuing on, and he spoke all the time of Master's living presence, of Master's intuitively guiding him, and so many others of the direct disciples, how Master was not a body, not a personality. And yet, when Swamiji returned to the Biltmore Hotel, what was it? I think it was maybe 40 years later or more than that, for the first time after Master's Mahasamadhi. So the first time in 40 years, he said, it's not easy to be back here. You see, of course, it was also quite easy. At another Mahasamadhi celebration, he said, it's not easy to talk about that moment, as he read the description of, how Master stood up to give his speech and ended with his poem, My India, and so on. So, although we know on one level the cosmic truth, and we even may experience part of it by feeling Master's guidance to us even in the moment, when all the disciples were gathered outside his crypt, where his body was, one was standing apart, and she heard Master's voice in her ears saying, I'm not in there. You see? So we can have those experiences, and yet we also can feel the loss on a human level. You see, both levels of reality exist. We don't need to or should, nor should we deny the one for the other. Of course, many people are denying the spiritual in favor of the human, fine. But it's not, when people come to the spiritual path, sometimes they make the mistake of doing the reverse, and they just deny their true feelings and call them not spiritual, and therefore I don't have them because I am spiritual. Not only is it not healthy, it's not effective. It doesn't work. It's important to be honest with ourselves and just allow ourselves to be where we are, and from there we can move forward. But when when people, for example, when Miss Sister Gyanamata, his most advanced woman disciple, left the body, he wept. When somebody left him at different times, he wept. And it wasn't that he didn't see them in God, they'll be free in 3 lifetimes or whatever it was, but still, as he said, I have to balance my divine and my human natures. This world really is one of both and, not either or. This is a picture of Swamiji. It's not very clear, but Swamiji's here. This is at the Hollywood Church. And in the years after Master's passing, Swamiji became the main minister at this church. This is missing from the Answer movie. You have Master's Mahasamadhi in the movie, and then it jumps to Swamiji, sitting, the actor playing Swamiji sitting in the building of the first temple at the meditation retreat at Ananda Village, which jumps ahead to 1967. That's when that was first built, or when the land was first acquired by Swamiji. So we have from 1952 jumping 15 years further. And so this is picking up from 1952 and going on to 1953 and so on. This photo may have been 1955, I'm not sure. But Rajarshi was the president for a few years after Master, from 1952 to 55, and then Dayamata became the president. This was Swamiji with Dr. Lewis standing outside the Hollywood Church. This is at the lake shrine, which we saw the photo of the dedication of with Master, with Swamiji doing the yoga postures and then standing with Master back there. That's where that was. This was a gathering, I believe, of center leaders from all over the world. because there were so many SRF meditation groups and centers in, again, different countries. And some of the people are recognizable in this photo, and Swamiji was pointing out a few of them. Swamiji's here. Swamiji was the director of all the centers worldwide. He was in addition to being in charge of the monks, he was the director of all the center activities. This is another photo of Swamiji at the lake shrine. This is I think this is Hinduism, but this is the Om sign, obviously, and so there are these little markers for each of the world religions that Master had put there. And so many people learn of Master even now because they come to the lake shrine. They find it, I'm talking about the general public, they find it a nice place to walk around. They feel sort of a peaceful vibration, and then they come to learn that it is from Paramhansa Yogananda. This is at another of Master's properties, Encinitas, which was the hermitage that was given to him. It's where he wrote much of Autobiography of a Yogi, our beloved book. And so, greeting people, this is Rajarshi, Master's most advanced disciple, as I said. Dr. Lewis is next to him, nearly invisible, and then Mrs. Lewis. And I believe this is Durga Mata. Yeah, this is Durga Mata next to them. And so they were greeting people, and then the people would go in, and Swamiji was welcoming them as well. This is a photo of Swamiji with Master's second most advanced disciple. Again, Master is the one who told us all this, Mr. Black. And you may remember Mr. Black from the Answer movie with the miracle of the stormy weather just suddenly ending and the sun being out and so on. And so, again, this is the actual Mr. Black. Swamiji was just about to get into this plane and fly, I think, to Mexico. I'm not sure. But he was, again, he traveled all over the world on behalf of SRF, visiting the different centers, again, which he was overseeing, but meaning he was trying to support all the leaders and all that they were doing, but then also giving public lectures on behalf of Master's teachings, or sharing Master's teachings. This is an example of an ad for a talk, the Christ Consciousness Through Yoga, on Monday, October 22nd at 8 p.m., and then Reincarnation, Truth or Myth, on Thursday. And so this was in Vancouver, in Canada. And so it says that Reverend Brother Kriyananda is a direct disciple of Paramhansa Yogananda and a member of Self-Realization Fellowship. Swamiji also was very well known for his beautiful voice. Master encouraged him in chanting and singing, and Swamiji, after traveling to India, also learned many Indian bhajans, that sort of traditional songs, in addition to, of course, all of Master's chants. He also learned some from records, Bengali chants that Master had records of, and so he would often be chanting with the tampura or with the harmonium, and was, often called upon to do so, both in India and in America. This is in Italy, I believe, and when Swamiji was traveling on behalf of SRF, and I think I saw another version of this, another angle of this photo. I think it might even be a Kriya initiation. This is a photo of a Kriya initiation, Swamiji doing this in Australia. It was the first time that Kriya had ever been given in Australia. And as he said, his presence when he came to Australia, drew big crowds, not only because he was teaching yoga and was a direct disciple of Paramahansa Yogananda, but also because he was from America, and so few people came to Australia from America. He said, my mere presence was news just in itself. He said, of course, the exoticness of his origins coming from so far away drew the initial crowds in Australia and later in India. He said just drew people out of curiosity. But what kept people coming was the teachings of Master, when they realized how much this could change their own lives. And so that, of course, was the real power, and Swamiji's ability to share that power, to act as a channel for that power to others. This was Swamiji greeting the center leader of Mexico City. This is Dayamata in the background here, again at a gathering. Swamiji became the vice president of Self-Realization Fellowship, Dayamata the president, Swamiji the vice president. And then in 1958, Swamiji went to India. Dayamata sent him there. Partly, she was going to come, and she followed a few months after, and it was really their first trip to India. In a major way. I don't know what had ever happened before, but they wanted to see what was going on with Yogoda Satsanga Society, the original organization of Master, which he founded, depending on how you count, I guess you could say 1917, with the first school in Dihika, which later moved to Ranchi, and that's where the headquarters of YSS is even now. And so this was, of course, in Puri, obviously, the Jagannath Temple. So Swamiji, when he first went there in 1958, partly what he did was travel around the country giving lectures on yoga, teaching, meeting the different centers, spending time at the headquarters there, which in Calcutta, in Ranchi, but also there was a big center in Dakshineshwar, which is still there. And so Swamiji again found many crowds drawn to him, not just because he was an American Swami, which is perhaps curiosity seekers, as I said, came for, but because of the practicality and the immediacy of the teachings. This is a photo at Master's home at 4 Garpar Road, which many of you have been to, and we look forward to going again when we can travel. And so, yeah, I think, in fact, that's our next pilgrimage destination. We go every year in February. We'll see about this coming year. But in any case, this is Master's brother Sananda, who drew the picture of Babaji in Autobiography of a Yogi, who drew this picture of Sri Yukteswar. This is a photograph. He took this photograph of Sri Yukteswar. And Sananda, the book Majda was written by Sananda. So again, many different ways in which you might know Sananda. This is he. His son, who isn't very visible here, obviously. Sometimes this program that I use zooms in on the photos more than I would like. This is Hari Krishna Ghosh, Sananda's son. And many of you have met Hari Krishna's son, Somnath. And so Somnath is, in fact, he had this health crisis maybe it was a few months ago, and we were all praying for him because he is living in Master's home right now. He and his wife Sharita keep the house open to so many. And so again, they're descended from Master's brother, Sananda. And Swamiji obviously is here, Dayamata here, her sister Anandamata. I wish I could name the other relatives. I'm not so good at that, but it was Master's family very warmly received Swamiji and Dayamata and the others. This is another photo of the same occasion. This is Sananda here. Well, it'll be nice to see this photo some other time when it's more clear. Swamiji's standing right here. And then, of course, this photo, which many of you have seen. Well, I'm sorry, I don't know why it does that. Anyway, this is Anandamoy Ma with Swamiji. This was in Rishikesh, and she, of course, Swamiji was very close to Anandamoy Ma. She called him her Choto Chele, and anyway, she said, out of thousands have passed before this body, as she put it, and she said, none have attracted me as you have. And she also, of course, there's a chapter on Anandamoy Ma that Master wrote when he had met with her years before. This is Swamiji with Sri Rama Yogi, who Master said was fully liberated. And he didn't mention him in Autobiography of a Yogi. Master said he didn't write of him because he was a disciple of Ramana Maharishi, and Master said he had actually surpassed Ramana Maharishi in realization, as he said sometimes happens, because he was fully liberated, a param mukta. And so Master said of Sri Rama Yogi, if I had spent another half hour in his presence, I could have never brought myself to leave India. Swamiji was able to meet Sri Rama Yogi at his ashram in Buchireddypalayam, which is sort of near Nellore. The ashram has since shifted to Anareddypalayam, which is the larger sort of sister village or city or whatever you want to call it, I'm not sure, next to it. I haven't been there, but Prem has been there, and others have gone to meet the translator who was translating between Swamiji and Sri Rama Yogi at the time of this meeting. This is at I think it's Hundrun Falls in Ranchi, and it's just a very nice photo. There's Swamiji meditating. And so he was traveling the country, he was generating interest for Dayamata. Then when traveling with her, he was mainly supporting her in all the things that she was doing. Again, this spans the years of 1958 to 1962. Swamiji took, at one point after his lecture tours, he took a seclusion in Kashmir, and this is a photo from that. It's amazing. It's from a slide, a color slide. It's just hard to believe it's so clear from so long ago. So then Swamiji began. He began a new phase where he realized that at that time in India's history, Delhi was the center of the country, and everyone was looking to Delhi and to Nehru for how to proceed into this new chapter of India's life. And so Swamiji had the feeling that if anything that could be done with Master's work in Delhi, it would then easily spread throughout the country. When he lectured in Delhi, he had a crowd of 2,000 people, and that interest continued to be sustained during the time that he was there. Delhi was new and in a certain way and fresh and open. It really represented the leading edge of India's connection with the rest of the world, and also, as I said, leading the rest of India as in the process. And so he began working on, rather than trying to build or do anything with the existing organizational headquarters in Calcutta, which was sort of going, shall we say, rather slowly. He thought to start a fresh new energy in Delhi. And he wrote to Dayamata, had her permission to see what he could do to get something going in Delhi. I'm not sure where this photo was taken. I assume it's India, but in any case, this is from this period in Swamiji's life. This is in Patiala during his lecture tour, but it also is. He began visiting in Delhi the different city commissioners, trying to understand how would it be possible to get land to build a temple or a ashram site or something in Master's name. Obviously, wherever Swamiji went, obviously he's being very well received here as as a disciple of Master. So this is hard to see at first, but this is a map of a property and this is a lake here. Swamiji felt that it would be ideal to get land in the green belt of Delhi. And people had told him it was impossible, that the last thing the government was interested in was ashrams. They wanted schools, factories, businesses, hospitals, and no more ashrams. We have too many ashrams even, was what he was told. And that the green belt especially, which was this protected area around Delhi that no development could be made in, was just to again, have no development. And so Swamiji said, rather, instead of saying, but I wanted, and in the name of my guru, which they wouldn't be able to relate to, he said, even as wealthy as Delhi is, it's not able to develop itself all this natural land. And you have Buddha Jayanti Park, which is, has some buildings for people to go and visit. And why not give this land to different social societies or private societies or religious societies to themselves turn into a garden or a parkland? And if you say there can't be any buildings there, then nobody will be able to come there and, have regular facilities as well as perhaps a restaurant or a cafe to enjoy themselves in, again, as Buddha Jayanti Park has. And so he began to win people to his cause because, as he said, he was thinking of it from their point of view, the advantages to them, and not just what he was seeking himself, which made it much more favorable. At that point then, the chief commissioner of Delhi, not the chief minister, but the commissioner of the land, said to him, I can sway the other commissioners to vote in favor of your plan. He said, you make some very good points, and I can see that this could work. But because this designation of the green belt has come from the highest level of government, you will need to have permission from Nehru himself. And Swamiji said, wonderful, could you then speak to Nehru? And the man said, oh no, you have to speak to Nehru. He wasn't about to stick his own neck out. And so Swamiji had commented that was sort of like saying, first go to the moon and then we'll talk. It seemed impossible. How was he going to speak to Nehru? And what was amazing was through a series of events that I don't have the time to go through right now, but Swamiji was able to meet with Nehru. And interestingly, because Nehru was said to be a little bit of changing disposition, of changing mood. You never knew sort of what mood you would find him in. And he generally didn't have much patience with religion, at least at that time. And this was in 1961, I think. And so Swamiji, on the day that Swamiji met him, Nehru had just lost a dear friend who had died that morning. Or at least that's when Nehru got the news. And so he was in a very unusually philosophical mood, and he spent 45 minutes with Swamiji discussing this plan. And then this, as I said, is the painting. This is a photo of a friend of Swamiji's, Rani Ban, who had introduced Nehru to, I think Swamiji took this photograph. This is Nehru looking down. You see here, it's hard to see, but this is that same painting, under glass, which is presented to Nehru. He's studying the painting you saw on the previous slide. And Nehru said, I like what you're proposing, and let me walk the land because Swamiji picked exactly the spot that he wanted. And he said, let me walk that land and then see what I think of it. And after a few days later, Nehru did so, and he gave his permission to Swamiji to develop this land, and gave it to him for a temple and a whole property for Paramhansa Yogananda. And then this is where the story shifts from this great triumph, this great climax, to then a great disaster. Because unfortunately, the Dayamata and others in SRF misinterpreted Swamiji's actions. And he had been in touch with them. Again, Dayamata had given her permission, but there was someone else in SRF who was actively campaigning against Swamiji and against anything that he was doing, including this. And so when he wrote to them to say, by God's grace, we have Nehru's permission to develop this land, he got a telegram back saying, we do not want the property. And then a phone call all the way from America to India in those days saying, we do not want the property. And Swamiji was very cooperative. Of course, it was colossally embarrassing to him to tell the Prime Minister, thank you for your gift of this, but actually we don't want it. But heedless of that, he cooperated with their decision. And this eventually led to the chain of events that led to Swamiji being thrown out of SRF by Dayamata and by this other person in SRF. And so it was quite sad on one level, on any level really. It's not sad when you look at all that has come since. Because really, as Swamiji said, that freed him to do the work that Master had given him to do. Master had told him to write books. He knew he could never write books within the confines of SRF. They were working on getting out Master's books. What time would they have had for his books? And yet Master had told him to write. Master had encouraged him in spreading the work and reaching out to more people. And that was something that was always at odds with this other disciple who was saying, we have to control the work and keep it small. And also, Swamiji felt in his heart a great, deep desire to build the communities that Master was always talking about. And Master said, you have a great work to do. And Swamiji never, he said, would have left SRF over a difference of opinion. He said, they had to throw me out. I was too loyal. There was no other way I could have been removed except violently. And so on one level, as he said, it was the supreme test of his life, and in one way, on a human level, the greatest tragedy. And yet, on another level, it freed him to be able to do this work. He was able to write 149 books afterwards, compose over 400 pieces of music, found 8 or 9 communities worldwide, including Ananda, India. I mean, we wouldn't be here, and as we've said before, even in Chennai, we wouldn't be here if it weren't for Swamiji and his visit here to Chennai. So, in this sense, we have to look to the whole story, not just to the tragic moment is not where the story ends, then it continues on. This is where I will need to end for today, just looking at the time. But from here, this moment in 1960, not this moment, but Swamiji was thrown out in July of 1962. And then it was 5 years later, 1967, that Swamiji bought that land, the first land of Ananda village that I was referring to, that you see in the Answer movie, the temple being built up on that property there. And he also, a few years, this was 1962, as I said, 1964, he began writing the music. In fact, the song that we sang, Nightingale, was actually a song he may have written even before that, or at least a poem when he was younger, but set it to music around that time. And Walk Like a Man, so many of the songs that we know, he had written just a few years after this terrible setback in his life. So it's important too, just as we heard in the Nightingale song, that morning laughter, evening tears, snow and blossoms all fade. Joy must sing in the night to face change unafraid. And the other the other line of that song, every grief, every wrong has its ending in song. And as we saw in Swamiji's life, it very much ended in song throughout the this grief from 1962 was replaced with a joy in 1967, 68, just a few years later, when Swamiji founded the first World Brotherhood Village, as Master called them, World Brotherhood Colony, the first community that actually came into existence, that Master had been urging people to create all those years before. And then from then on, so many more communities in America, also in Italy, and of course all of our centers we now have in India because of Swamiji and because of his work for Master. So let's include in our prayers to Master, let's include our gratitude to Swamiji for, again, bringing Master directly into our own lives.